Good morning, everyone. I came back from California last Tuesday. I stayed there for 2 weekends, and I visited 5 Zen centers and gave 7 Dharma talks. The purpose of my visit this time was to promote newly published books, the Zen teaching of Homer's Kodo and Dogen Zenji's workup book. So I talked on those 2 books, and people liked both books, so I was happy. And I sent 50 copies of workup book, and all 50 copies are gone. I gave several books to the teachers at the centers, so almost 50 copies were sold. Anyway, the weather there was really wonderful. Sometimes it was like a summer. It's too hot. But when I came back, I was surprised there's no snow, and it's not so cold. So I feel I'm relieved. When I returned from California, in the airplane, I thought I'm going to return to the real weather, covered with snow or ice or at least frost. But these days it's pretty mild. Anyway, I continue to talk on this book, Opening the Hand of Thought. And this morning I talk on 3rd paragraph of page 102. In the beginning of this page, the new section started, that is Delusion and Zazen. So now he starts to talk about Zazen. Before that, he talks about the one of the essential points of Buddha's teaching or Buddhist teachings, that is middle way between U and Mu, or being and non-being. And we are, U and Mu are our view or idea or opinion. But the reality of our life is neither U nor Mu. And in the last paragraph, he said, our Zazen, this Zazen is a practice that actualize or manifest this middle way, instead of grasping our life or ourselves, either U or Mu. And he said in this paragraph, one might well ask whether we exert ourselves or not, aren't we always living life as it is? Isn't it nonsense to speak of living apart from life? This is indeed so, and it is the basis of the Buddhist teaching that all beings have Buddha nature. Please. That is, actualizing life is our very nature. In the first sentence of the previous paragraph, he says, Zazen enables life to be life by letting it be. And he started this paragraph as a question to these sayings. Zazen enables life to be life by letting it be. That means, whether we practice Zazen or not, whether we study Dharma or practice, Buddha's teaching, we are living life. Whether we are deluded or enlightened, whether we practice or not practice, whether we are, happy or unhappy, we are always living life. How can it possible to enable life to be life by our practice? And that is the question Okumura Rōshi raised here. Whether we exert, make effort to ourselves to enable life to be life or not. And we always living life as it is. We cannot change the life because we are living life. And whatever condition, that is life. How can our effort or practice can change the life? Then isn't it nonsense to speak of living apart from life? Whatever condition we are right in the life, and that is life. So what is the meaning of practice or study or making effort to make life into life? And that is the question. And Okumura Rōshi kind of agreed with this question. In whatever situation or condition we are living life, we cannot live separate from the life. And that is true. So he said, this is indeed so. And it is the basis of the Buddhist teaching that all beings have Buddha nature. That is, actualizing life is our very nature. So, in this paragraph, he said this question, the person's question is correct. That means whether we make effort or not, whether we practice or not, we are living our life. There's no way to, live outside our life. So, why it's possible or necessary to practice? And what Okumura said, that is true, and because of that, in Buddhism it said all living beings have Buddha nature. But when we study Dogen, this all beings have Buddha nature needs to think carefully what this means. So now today I'd like to talk about this saying, all living beings have Buddha nature. And if we think because all living beings have Buddha nature, then we are already within the Dharma, or Dharma nature, or because in whatever condition we are living the life, so we don't need to practice. Everything is life, everything is Dharma. Then we make a mistake. So this is a kind of a strange thing, but to me, this is a really important point. What is our practice? What is our effort means? And why is it important? Well, all beings have Buddha nature is one of the important teaching of Mahayana Buddhism. And yet, this is this idea of Buddha nature appeared only in Mahayana Buddhism. In the early Buddhism, or in Shakyamuni Buddha's teaching, or even in the Nagarjuna's teachings, this concept, Buddha nature, does not appear. This idea or concept of Buddha nature appeared between Nagarjuna and Yogacara. Shakyamuni Buddha lived about 4 century BCE, before Common Era, and Mahayana Buddhism allowed around the first century, and Nagarjuna lived 2 to 3 centuries, and the Yogacara school appeared 4th century, and so this is around the time Mahayana Buddhism emerged, and the Mahayana Buddhism before Nagarjuna is called Early Mahayana, and several sutras, several Mahayana sutras such as Prajna Paramita or the Lotus Sutra or Avatansaka Sutra, and also Pure Land Buddhist Sutra made in this time, and Nagarjuna made kind of a philosophical foundation on this teaching using the concept of shunyata or emptiness. But around that time, Nagarjuna's school is called Madhyamika, and Madhyamika means seeing the middle. So for Nagarjuna, to see the middle way is important. But after Nagarjuna, there are two kind of Mahayana Buddhist theory was created. One is so-called Yogacara, and usually this teaching is called consciousness only. And another one is Buddha nature or Tathagata Garbha. Of course, Tathagata means the Buddha, and Garbha means womb or embryo, that is a baby. And the teaching of the very basic teaching of Tathagata Garbha is, the Buddha is within ourselves, each one of us, and yet it is hidden, like embryo is hidden within the womb, and yet when the embryo is born and grow and become mature, because this is the Buddha's baby. When it become Buddha. It become mature, it become Buddha. So in all living beings, there is a Tathagata Garbha, or baby Buddha. But it is hidden. That is the very basic teaching. And it is this Tathagata Garbha or Buddha nature doesn't change. Whether it is hidden within very deluded human living beings, and it doesn't reveal at all. That means we are all very deluded. Still, there is a Buddha in there. That is the basic teaching of Tathagata Garbha. And Yogacara school teaches whatever we experience is our consciousness. We cannot really see the reality as it is, as object. Whatever we experience as subject and object is production of our consciousness. So these three teachings become important teaching in Mahayana Buddhism. And of course, when all those teachings are introduced to China, some group think this is a basic teaching, or most important and the highest teaching, and the other people thought this is very important, very practical way of teaching. And some people think this is the best, most important for us. We need a faith that we have Buddha nature to encourage us to practice, even though it looks we are all very deluded. But if we practice following Buddha's teaching, then sometimes in the future we become Buddha. This is a kind of a belief or faith. And all these three teachings are mixed together in China. And in Zen, this teaching of Buddha nature become very important. So to find Buddha nature, to discover that this baby that is hidden is actually called Kensho. Ken means to see, and Sho is nature, that means Buddha nature. Seeing Buddha nature or discovering Buddha nature is one of the very important point in Mahayana Buddhism. Anyway, in this teaching of Tathagata Garbha, one of the most important sutra made in India was Mahayana Parinibbana Sutra. And in that sutra, it is said, Issai Shujō Shitsu Bussho. Issai means all. Shujō is living beings, and Shitsu is all of them, or without exception, completely. And U is have, and Bussho is Buddha nature. So all living beings, without exception, all of them have Buddha nature. This is a very basic statement about the Buddha nature. So each one of us, whoever we are, we have Buddha nature. Therefore, all human beings, all living beings have possibility to become Buddha if we study Buddha's teaching and practice Buddha's teaching and getting mature little by little, sooner or later, maybe not within this lifetime. It takes 3 great kalpas. That means more than forever. But there is possibility because we have Buddha nature. That is the basic teaching. But Zen, especially Chinese Zen people, didn't like this idea that it takes more than forever. They want to see Buddha nature within this lifetime. That is called the sudden enlightenment. And one of the kind of famous sayings in Zen is, in usual or common teaching in Mahayana Buddhism was, after we arouse bodhicitta and aspiration to become Buddhist, Buddha's student, and start to practice and study, in order to reach the goal, that is Buddhahood, we need to go through 52 stages. This is a common idea of how Bodhisattva become Buddha. But that very famous teaching in Zen is Icho Jiki Nyu Nyorai Chi. That Ichi means one. Cho is go beyond or transcend. And Jiki is directly, Nyu is enter. And Nyorai is Tathagata. And Chi is ground. But Nyorai Chi means Buddhahood. So with one jump, directly enter the Buddhahood. Instead of going little by little, gradually, and finally reach the Buddhahood. This is called gradual practice. And then people said their teaching is sudden enlightenment. That means within one jump we enter Buddhahood. That is Buddha's teaching. I mean, one of the important points of Chinese Zen teaching. That so from Zen point of view, the other Mahayana practice is very kind of slow, and it takes forever. But Zen teaching is like taking what is shortcut or take an airplane instead of walking. And that is this statement. All living beings, without exception, have Buddha nature is a basis of this idea of sudden enlightenment. But problem is Dogen. In Sōtō Zen tradition that was founded by Dogen, we follow Dogen's teaching. And Dogen have a question about this teaching. So when he discussed about Buddha nature, his idea is quite different from the common idea of Buddha nature in Mahayana Buddhism or even in Chinese Zen. That is strange, and that is a problem. I write the sentence from the Parinibbana Sutra again. Issai Shujō Shitsu Bushō Tsu. This part is no problem. All living beings. But Dogen read this part quite different way. He wrote a chapter of Shobo Genzo entitled Buddha Nature. So and this is one of the longest chapter or the fascicle in Shobo Genzo. And he discussed about what Buddha nature is. And this was one of the most difficult writing of Dogen. But anyway, in the beginning of Shobo Genzo Bussho or Buddha nature, he discussed the meaning of this phrase, Shitsu Bussho, and that is what Okumura Rōshi wrote in Japanese version of this paragraph. When he says, all beings have Buddha nature. Okumura Rōshi wrote this phrase, Shitsu Bussho. And of course, as a common way of reading this phrase, all beings have Buddha nature is correct. It's not a mistaken. Or actually, this is the only way to read this phrase. But Dogen did this in a very kind of a strange way. This shitsu is adverb without exception, or all of them, and u is have. That is very common and right way to read this Chinese phrase. But he did this shitsu as one word. So this is not adverb and verb, but he did this shitsu as a noun. That means this u can mean have, but also can mean be or being. And shitsu means can also mean entire. So he did this shitsu as entire being. And he did this sentence as all living beings, or entire being of all living beings, is Buddha nature. So it's not a matter of have. So, this translation in this book is not mistaken. This is a common way of reading this phrase. This is the only possible way. But when we study Dogen, we have to be careful. That means he doesn't say Buddha nature is something that can be owned by living beings. If living beings can own these things called Buddha nature, then this person and Buddha nature are separate. This is subject, and Buddha nature is object of to be owned. But Dogen did this as all beings, entire beings, so not a part of it. As I said, a common understanding of Buddha nature is, we are deluded, but within our life or within ourselves, there is Buddha nature, which is always enlightened, never changed. So no matter how deluded we are, Buddha nature does not lose the beauty or preciousness and doesn't change. Whether this way is hidden with very deluded person, or whether Buddha nature in Buddha completely revealed. The Buddha nature never change. That is the meaning of Buddha nature in common idea. So often Buddha nature is compared with the diamond covered with rock or dirt. When diamond is hidden within rock, it doesn't reveal the beauty. So first thing we have to do is to discover this Buddha nature, this diamond is hidden within the rock. When we discover, the precious Buddha nature is hidden within us, then next thing we have to do is take this dirt or the rock out and polish this diamond. That is a process of our practice. Then the beauty and preciousness of diamond start to be revealed. That is the idea of our practice based on this teaching of Buddha nature. But when Dogen did this all living beings the entire beings of all living beings is Buddha nature. There's no such separation in Dogen's idea. With beautiful diamond and ugly and deluded rock or dust. This entirety is Buddha nature. So Dogen is a strange person. When we study the common teaching of Mahayana Buddhism and the common teaching of Chinese Zen, Dogen is something different. That is a problem. And when we think of Buddha nature in this way, in Dogen's way, Buddha nature is entirety of this body and mind, or these five skandhas. It's not one part that is hidden and yet precious and doesn't change. And there's no such thing that doesn't change and precious within five skandhas. Five skandhas are only there. Then what is this something which doesn't change? Is a kind of a problem in Buddhist teaching, because Shakyamuni said only five skandhas are there. There's nothing that doesn't change. Five skandhas means our body and mind. Our body and mind are always changing. Then what this Buddha nature can be is, I think, Dogen's question. So he said, Buddha nature is not something like this. And our practice is not discovering the diamond and take this dirty part out and polish the diamond. So our practice is moment by moment. That means, in my understanding, in the case of Dogen's teaching, I think he's always talking about the interconnectedness, or interconnected arising. That means we and all other beings are working together. That is what interdependent origination. And one of the examples often used in Mahayana Buddhism, or I often use, is a seed. And seeds grow gradually and finally become mature tree. When seed was planted, if there's some condition are not there, this seed cannot sprout and grow, such as sunlight or some humidity or temperature. So because of these conditions, this seed can grow. And after for a while, this seed grow and become a matured tree, and this tree can bloom flowers or bear fruits. Then this tree can offer something to other beings. So we need help or support from all beings as a condition to grow. And when we become mature enough, we have something to offer to other beings. So that means this small being and all other conditions that support this small seeds start to grow. are actually one thing. That is the idea of Dogen's Zenki, or total function. It's not a matter of this seed as its own personal independent effort get some sunlight, humidity, and temperature, but all those are given. And because of that, this can sprout and grow. In that case, this seed and this entirety are one thing, and this is one function, one movement. That is what Zenki means, and it continues through the time. And when it becomes matured, the tree can offer flower. Somehow when we see the flowers, somehow, I don't know why, we become happy. We smile. But, to make us smile is not the purpose of the tree, to bloom the flowers. And somehow, within the flower there are some nectars, so insect can come and get some nutrition. And also insect can help, the pollen of these trees carry them to another trees and, help this tree to continue to produce next generation. So all these are working together. So according to Dogen's idea of entire being is Buddha nature, this entirety is Buddha nature. And this way of being that each and every beings support and help each other. That is, I think, very basic teaching of interdependent origination in Mahayana and Dogen's teaching of Zenki, or total function. So when Okumura Rōshi quote this phrase here as when he discussed about Zazen, I think we interpret in this way. That means the way we live within this network of interdependent origination is Buddha nature. So Buddha nature is not something hidden within these deluded beings. That's the difference. The way things function together. Dogen's very important saying appears in the Tendo Kyokun is, nothing is hidden. So Buddha nature is not something hidden, but Buddha nature is revealed. And yet we cannot see Buddha nature because we are part of it. We are always inside of this network, so we cannot see this network from outside as an object. And when we see this entirety from inside, we need to take a position. So we cannot, and our eyesight can only see, this part. We cannot see the other part. So we cannot see this entirety. That means our view, our way of viewing things is limited, and that is called karmic, because of our way of viewing things caused by our experiences in the past from our birth. Because I was in Japan, certain place in this planet, and I was educated in Japan using Japanese language. My view was created from that kind of a limited experience. If, not if, but other people live in America or France or China or wherever can see very different way. not only language but also religion or philosophy or the situation of the country. We see this entirety from very different way, from different part of this entirety. So our view is limited. But we, all of us, which has very different views, are, living within, existing within this Indra's net. And this way of being within this interconnectedness, according to Dogen, is Buddha nature. So, what Okumura Rōshi is saying is, whether we are deluded or not, we are part of this, total function. We never get out of total function, but we cannot see it as our view using our thinking. So there is a possibility that we lose sight of this, interconnectedness. And we often, or the way we are educated is to see the individuality using, language and concept and words. The function of language is separation or making distinction. What is the difference between this thing and this thing, or this person and other people? That is how language is function and is used. So by using language or concept or logics, we start to see that ourselves and all other things in a kind of a clear way. So we can make distinction, and we think that is understanding or knowledge. But within this knowledge using words and concept, we lose the sight of this entirety, that we are one working together. It's the same as, the heart and stomach and all the other parts of our body function as one. But when we call heart, that is separate from the rest of the body. And when we see stomach, we see the particular way of this organ works that is different from rest of the body. So, and we think this body is a kind of a collection of separate different parts, like the car parts. But in the case of car, we can deassemble it and make into each parts, and we can assemble them again and function in the same way. But our body cannot do such a thing. Our stomach and our heart and the rest of our parts of our body is really one thing. So this is two sides of our life. One is when we view things, this body, and using words and letters and concept, then we can see this is a collection of different parts, and each part has its own uniqueness and unique particular function that is different from other parts. But we often lose the sight that this is one thing. And I think when we see our life in this way, then we can see, this one seed is a particular independent being, but to be this one tiny seed, to be the particular beings, all those support is necessary. Otherwise, seed cannot be a seed. Or there is another possibility that if there aren't enough support from the environment, then this seed lose life. And it cannot grow, cannot sprout and grow. So not only a positive effect such as support and help, but there is also negative effect within relation between self and entire conditions. That means we are, it is possible that we don't see this entire network, and we cannot live as individual beings, individual person with the harmonious relation with others. When something doesn't go along to support this seed have to die or cannot grow in a healthy way. So this is, this is not, how can I say, positive at all, but also the negative things are also interconnected. So within this structure, to live in a wholesome way, we have to make effort. And even if there are, enough conditions that can support us, if our life force is injured, it cannot function in a healthy way. So to keep this interconnectedness and keep this total function in a wholesome and healthy way, we have to keep effort. And one of the effort we need to do is to be free from our limited karmic view. And because we usually think this is me, and this is the owner of these five skandhas, our body and mind. And we cannot see this total function, but we think, what we feel, that I'm living because of my effort. I can live because I can compete with others and win, because we are stronger than others. Then we can continue to live, and we can become powerful or better than others. All depend upon my personal effort. I can keep my life in a good condition. But I think that is a very basic delusion. We cannot live without air or water or food, and also the knowledge we studied from the community of human beings. So we never separate from this way of life beyond thinking, and yet we cannot live without thinking, and our thinking is limited by our limited experiences, how we are born and grown up. So both part is necessary part, but because we usually think this is me, we need to become free from this me, this grasping as me, and these five skandhas, our body and mind, is my possession. Because this is me and this is my thinking, therefore this is absolutely right. And any thinking that is different or contradicted are failure or wrong or not complete. Then we start to fight against them. That is how our life becomes samsara, competition with others, compete with others. So, I think that is what Okumura Rōshi is saying here. So, to me, this to see the difference of two ideas about Buddha nature is a kind of important to understand Dogen's teaching and to understand our Zazen practice based on Dogen's teaching. That is what I have to say this morning. And Okumura Rōshi continue to discuss about our Zazen. Well, this is what I have to say this morning. Any question or comments? Please.
So when Dogen uses that phrase, entire being, so he's referring to the same thing as he refers to when he says total functioning or being goes net. Is that in this context?
I think so. This is the interconnectedness, and total function is how all beings are working together within this network. Okay. Please.
Is there a point where two teachings are compatible?
Compatible.
Not contradictory. The way I'm processing it is your left brain, it's language. And it thinks past and future. And then your right brain is always in the now and it's more collective. And we need to use both to function.
Right.
So is there a point that I'm wondering the diamond idea and the collective entire being idea are not, competing, but they're complementing one another?
I am not sure, because I have been studying only Dogen, and I think this is different. But in my understanding, within this structure, both right and left brain function. That means within to see this seed as one, as me, and to make I think I'm different from you and all other people, and when I introduce myself, I say I'm a Japanese Buddhist priest. That is using my word and concept. But I also often say, this is not Shohaku, this is not Japanese, this is not a Buddhist, especially when we sit. So when we think, we use the one side of our brain, and when we sit and letting go of all those thinking, we I don't know which is left and right. we don't use so much with distinction, the ability to make distinction, but see the oneness. And the balance between two are important in our practice. But I'm not sure when we see this structure, how this works. Maybe this is no discrimination, and this is discrimination. So we need to find the reality of beyond discrimination. To do so, we need to be free from discriminating mind. So I think in both cases, both sides of our brain, I think function together, and that is important to keep the balance of discrimination and non-discrimination. And these are not contradicted. This is function of one brain, I think. Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you. Sa to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to let them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it.
Few announcements. We have Nirvana Day session coming up. This starts Friday, goes Friday and Saturday, and then on Sunday we have Nirvana Day session ceremony. So please come for that.
Is there a potluck?
Yeah, after ceremony, yeah, we usually have potluck lunch.
Okay, great.
So please come.
This session is a little different. There's no fee for this, but you're responsible for your own meals. No fee unless you're staying in the dorm, of course. So
And you can come anytime and sit any period of time, and you can leave anytime.
right. We need doans for session.
Yeah.
No one has signed up for doan yet, so we have.
Sign up seat on the bulletin board. So if you plan to sit and if you are willing to do one, please sign up.
there's no practice committee meeting tomorrow night, is that right?
Usually we don't have meeting in February and August.
Okay.
I don't remember.
You're right, I was
think
just,
so, yeah.
we've changed the schedule a bit
Yeah.
for February, so
Mhm.
I was just wondering,
Okay.
so. Are there other announcements? This temple runs on our generosities, so please give as you can. Are we having tea?
Seems so.
Okay.
Pick up something.
All right, thank you. Okay.
So John, if you like, I'll give you a quickie 5-minute tutorial.
Absolutely, is that right? Have you been away?
Yes.
Okay. So the morning schedule, the morning Zazen. Everyone's supposed to be in their seat at
Friends.
5 minutes. 5 minutes after. So just don't walk down.